Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Raw Uncovered Truth of the Awakened Soul with Nicole. That's me. And today we're going to address being the black sheep and being the cycle breaker and the childhood that comes with it. And I know a lot of people speak on this, and a lot of people, signed up for these soul contracts coming here in order to, to evolve and be the light being that you're meant to be, right? In order to be on your soul journey, your soul purpose, and share it with the world. So let's start with my childhood, right? So when I was young, everybody, like my childhood friends would be like, oh, like your parents really just don't care. Like that's not normal, right? And I would be like, like, and obviously I knew I was in a dysfunctional household, right? I mean, I knew that since I was very, very young. But like it didn't really like, dawn on me how dysfunctional it was until I actually reached my 40s. And then like it all came to light and then it just all kept coming, from, just trickling down and what they say, eyes wide open when you do start your awakenings and not that you start your awakenings because I've always been very connected. When you start evolving and faster and faster and faster and you go through these tower moments and you go through these like yeah, levels of awakening, you see things. You see things a lot clearer. You see things differently. You have those, oh wow moments, like and your body shivers, right? I've spoken about this several times. Your body always knows, right? Your body will tell you the truth. Your body will tell you when something's coming. Your body will tell you when something's on point, right? I mean, you'll get the goosebumps, you'll shake a little bit, like you'll feel like you have to shake it out, like, like shake something out. Um, I'm trying to like think off the top of my head what else your body knows, right? Your nervous system, your body will either tense up and then, like the release or, it'll tense up and, you're not supposed to be in that situation. So let's talk about, that's a great opener for, for the childhood, the chronic trauma, in your childhood that somebody could be in, and you don't realize it until later in life. Also stems from the patterns, right? That's why you're the cycle breaker, you're the pattern breaker, you're the like, it stops here, it doesn't go anywhere else. Like, it's not happening to my kids. And you try your hardest to make it, right? I mean, listen, there are people that stay stuck for years, decades, don't even like, unstick themselves in this lifetime, right? And keep repeating those same cycles over and over. And then there are those, right, of us that wake up and be like, nah, fuck that. It stops right here, right now. It's not going past me. And you try your hardest, to evolve, with that and have it not, cycle down to your children. So, what happens, when you have chronic childhood trauma, right? It's the chaos that you live in, and your body, your nervous system, becomes tolerated to it. So I wanted to like, put in a graph here, but I don't know how to do that. I'm not like special like that. So I'm just going to kind of like bottom line it. So let's use, me as an example. And I know there are a ton of you that grew up like this, right? And there was constant fighting in my house, constant. I'm an only child, right? You would think like I had a smooth life. It was all, rainbows and butterflies, furthest from that, right? So as young as I can remember, and I want to say like as far back as I was 4, I would wake up to screaming and yelling, right? My parents screaming and yelling, "Oh, I'm going to kill you," blah, 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 all of that for until like it didn't even phase me in my teens anymore. Well, obviously it phased me, but like it didn't really take any type of reaction, right? So like my body wasn't really reacting to it anymore because I was tolerating it. But you have this, when you're in chronic trauma as a childhood, it's called chronic childhood trauma, right? So you start off at a graph, right? So the graph is flat. And this is what you could tolerate. This is your nervous system. When you live in a household that there is constant arguing, constant fighting, constant chaos, right? Your threshold becomes higher. So this is your bottom line, but you could tolerate shit that's up to here. No child should be able to tolerate that. And you don't realize that, right? Until like you get much, much older and you start really working on yourself and like really, realizing what the fuck happened to you, right? And why you were in like all of these like bad relationships and why you kept repeating the cycles over and over and over again, right? Because your tolerance was here, right? You accepted all this shit in between. You didn't have to, right? But you were so regulated to it that you thought it was normal, right? So I grew up thinking, hey, it's okay, like if everybody fights. However, when I was fighting in a relationship, I hated it and I wanted out ASAP. That's number one, right? That's how I knew it was different. Like I was like not tolerating that at all. Even when I was younger, I was like, oh no, I gotta get out of this like ASAP. I didn't stand for shit, but I did also because my tolerance was so high. So obviously when it passed that threshold is when I was like, okay, I need to get the hell out of this. But I didn't realize that I was dealing with all of that, right? So I was accepting the behavior, right? I was accepting the abandonment, right? Because it wasn't about me as a kid. It was about them. It was about who was pulling rank, who was the one who was looking like the better parent, who was throwing the other one under the bus and literally using me as a pawn in the same household, right? And I've said this for as many people have known me, like over the years, I've always stressed the fact that one, my parents should have never stayed married. Two, my parents should have not have had children. They were by far the best aunt, the best uncle, right? You couldn't get anybody better than them, right? Especially my dad. Couldn't get anybody better than that. But as far as parents goes, I raised myself. I was the child, like being the adults in a situation with them, right? I could go on a little deeper into everything that it involved, but I'm going to try to keep it as, like as surface level as possible. So here's my thing, right? You grow up thinking that it's okay to be neglected, right? It's okay to hide your feelings because nobody's listening. Nobody cares if it doesn't involve one of them, right? And they're not playing it against each other. You're like literally, like it's not even you're a distraction. You're just, you're a nuisance for being there because now they have to deal with you, right? So they're dealing with their own shit, but now they have to deal with you. I grew up in a household that I thought had a narcissist as a dad, right? Funny story. And this is like a really good story. So, yeah, my dad had major, major anger issues, right? Especially when it came to my mom. She provoked him 100% every single time she provoked him. Then she ran off, played the victim and the martyr, right? And then there were times where, as I got older, she'd go in her room, she'd close the door, and I'd have to sit there and I'd have to beg her to come out, right? Mom, come out, Mom, I love you. It's okay. Like we'll move out, we'll leave Daddy. This and this and that. And like when I watch, like when I replay it, I'm like, how fucked up did she have me, right? That I was thinking that this man, although he was violent, and I'm not going to lie about that, right, was going to like beat us to death, right? Like I was scared shitless that he was going to do something to her and do something to me, right? So that in itself kept me on edge, right? I was not a relaxed kid. I couldn't even sleep. I remember my mom bringing me to therapy, and the therapist was like, "Well, I think you guys need to come sit down, and she just needs to like color at night." Color at night. I was also getting visits from God only knows who, like now that you realize who your guides are and everything else, but they always kept me in line, right? And I always think about if I didn't have that, even at such a young age, it's like, they started coming in rapidly from 4 to 8. I remember that, sitting in my room and people coming in and people talking to me and saying, it's okay, like and like playing with my hair and like just not physically touching me, but like, energy wise, it's okay. You're where you're supposed to be, this and this and that. I also remember staring at my birth certificate going, I don't belong here. This is not where I belong. Like, I do not belong here. Fast forward to come to find out this is my first only, right? Like full blown incarnation. Other than that, I was a walk in, walk out girl. Thousands, and I mean thousands of lifetimes, but never one that was fully incarnated from birth to now, right? Would never choose this again. I know I signed up for this for a specific reason, but I would never, ever, ever, ever choose this again. And if I don't come back here ever again, totally okay with that too. Actually, I'm more than okay with that. I said, that's it. I'm done. I'm never coming back here and dealing with this bullshit again in the Matrix. It sucks you in, right? You come here, you have this big, huge game plan. Then you come in as a child. It all gets, you come into a household that is not full of love. Let's be realistic. And you forget, you have amnesia, right? But the whole time I was so alone, even as a kid in the house, that like all of these things would come back to me. And I would, and I've spoken about that on many episodes where like I'd be in school and I'd be like, that's wrong. Like, why are we not like speaking? Why are we talking out loud? Why can't she hear me, like talking to myself? Why are the planets aligned this way? Why are the stars like everything's just like wrong, 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 like history wrong, right? And I would sit there like, and I'm talking about young, and I'd be like, and it just got worse as I got older because I was like, this is just all wrong. Like, this is not the real deal. Like, this is not like how it goes, right? So anyway. So let's get back to the, how my mom had me completely convinced that my dad was like the arch enemy of enemies, right? But on the flip side, here she was like having me listen to the self-esteem tapes, and I'm talking about I was young, right? I was no older than 8. So from anywhere from like 4 to 8, she'd have me listening to these self-esteem tapes, right? When you're the one causing all the chaos. Go figure, right? But you have me listening to these self-esteem tapes when I was a kid, right? And I'd be like, what the hell am I listening to? And why am I listening to this? Right? She also, would claim, oh, I wanted you to have this relationship with your dad. I always wanted you to have this amazing relationship with him, right? That's why we stayed together, blah, blah, blah. The list goes on and on and on, right? But every single time my dad and I got along, she'd throw a shit fit. She'd literally sit there and she'd be like, huff and puff and, have something to say and then storm off. But you don't realize that until you're older, right? Because she was the one who would start the chaos and then come in and try to hold you and comfort you and say, oh, it's okay, honey. Everything's okay. Everything's all right. I love you. You're loved. Blah, 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 blah. Now, if you do your research and you know anything about that, that's your total covert narcissist, right? The martyr, the victim, causes the chaos, then plays it off as the victim. And in my family, she is known as the victim, right? It was always, oh, Diane, oh, he's so bad. Your husband is this and this and that. Listen, was he a great guy? Absolutely. Was he a great dad? No. And I've said that a million times. Was he an amazing grandfather to my children before he passed away? Absolutely. From day one, that man was the most amazing grandfather to my kids that I couldn't even, I mean, I can't even, there's no words to express, right? The only other best grandfather was my own grandfather, right? So no comparison though. My grandfather was on a different level, right? He didn't get down and dirty, like with the kids on the floor. He taught me at a young age how to hammer a nail, how to paint, how to do things like, myself, how to cut steel or wood or whatever the hell it was with a saw. And I was literally in, the workshop at the age of 4 doing all of this. Like he made sure, throughout the years that I knew how to take care of myself, that I knew how to hold my own, right? That's what my grandfather installed. But my grandfather was unconditional love and support. My grandmother, unconditional love and support. Whenever I was with them, my nervous system was so chilled. As a kid, so chilled. I can't explain it to you. If you've been there, you obviously, like you could relate 1000%. So chilled. It didn't matter where I was when I was with them, completely chill. That was my safe haven. That was my safety net. That was I can't even tell you like what the effect is that my grandparents had on me. And it's strange, right? And I knew that as a kid, like, oh, this is safety. Like I could totally just chill and relax and, not think of anything. Although sleeping over their house was kind of always freaky for me. I don't know why. Just I guess being in a different situation and like guides were constantly coming to me regardless of where I was. So, I mean, like it was what, it is what it was, or it was what it was as a child. So, there's that. I guess that there's, like that aspect. But I have to say it's completely amazing, what you realize when you do evolve, when you do all the clearings on yourself. You know, when you really want to realize why you keep getting stuck in these, same cycles, same patterns, same relationships, over and over and over, and you dig deep and you actually find the answer. Sometimes the answer is not what you expect at all, and you're just like, oh, fuck me, moment. But it is what it is. So let me tell you a little bit about how, people thought, oh, my parents were like the coolest parents because I could literally do anything. I could tell them anything, whatever, whatever. It's true. I could say anything. Nobody fucking gave a shit. No one paid attention to what I was saying. I was saying, oh, I'm going here, I'm doing this, right? Some things were like, on a level where they should have stepped in, or especially my mom, because, she was my best friend. Um, you know, where you should have said something. Nothing. Nothing. I mean, like I will give you like 1,000 examples, but nothing. And I remember, you know, just like being a kid, especially in my teens, right? And I love when people are like, "Oh, well, you were just a hard teen." No, I had no fucking parents. Like there was no parental. My grandparents were the parents. Like my grandmother stayed up, right? I mean, I would be out until all types of freaking hours, and this was like, starting from 13 and up, right? And she'd wait up and she still had a job in the morning. She was your typical Italian lunch lady, going to school, until she retired. And then, she'd insist on me eating something, and she'd make soup constantly, like tomato soup. She made something else. I can't remember the other soup, but like tomato soup was like a huge thing. And it would be like, I can't even tell you what time. And she'd insist on me eating. She's like, I know you didn't eat. So you got to eat. Like you're like I'm making you soup. We're eating. I'm sitting with you. We're eating, and then I'll go to bed. Okay, grandma, like whatever. She didn't have to do that, right? She didn't have to do that. She never spoke bad about my parents. Actually, what she did do was, all the hatred I had for my dad, because that's, how it came across to me as a kid. She'd always tell me, that's your father, that's this is that, and blah, 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 blah. And she'd always try to talk to me. She'd never say anything about, she'd never say anything about anything, which I think was funny because obviously she knew what was going on, right? I mean, you had to. How could you not see what was going on? So there's that aspect going, like whatever. So that's all right. Cycle, right? That's the abandonment, the neglect, I mean, like the list keeps going, right? So when you start going into these relationships, especially like the older that you get, you're so used to this. You're so used to you're trying to speak to your partner and your partner's paying no fucking attention to you, and then like an hour later, pays attention to you and you're thriving on that. You're like, oh my God, finally, like, he's paying attention to me. No, no, that's not normal. That's not normal. But I thought that was normal, right? You treat me like shit, but then, 5 seconds later, you're hugging me and telling me how amazing I am, and, how you can't live without me and blah, blah, blah. Again, not normal, right? But to me, completely normal, right? The abandonment issues that I had, off the charts. The neglect issues I had, off the charts, also falls into abandonment. And there are many times where I've made so many videos going, about childhood trauma and the neglect and the abandonment wounds and all of these, all of these wounds that I used to actually have up on my website. But it actually got too expensive to keep the videos up there, so I took it down and I just made the entire thing, like, free access to everybody, accessible. But I should actually put those back up. They were up there like a couple of years ago. So anyway, um, just a shortness on the breaking of the cycles, right? Of you being the black sheep, because nobody could relate to what you went through in the family, right? Everybody was in their own little bubble. My mom had everybody convinced that she was the victim, even me, right? Even to this day, where just recently she said to me, oh, where's my little girl who loved me so much? Oh yeah, who thought that, dad was going to kill us, that, you deserved better, and that I like literally begged you for attention. Like I would beg her for attention and she'd always use an excuse. Oh, well, daddy's not gonna, he can't stay alone, or he was fine. He was perfectly capable of staying. There was zero things wrong with him on that level. But like she'd use him as as the scapegoat all the time. But then like my cousins would come visit, and or like her business trips, and she would constantly be going out, constantly, for work, constantly be going away, constantly be going out, with her nieces, her nephews. But when it came to me, where was my mom? Right? That was me begging my mom for attention. So yeah, so I was in relationships where I was begging guys for attention. No, that's like a huge no. And it took me a really hard, long time to realize what the fuck was actually going on. The moral of the story, always tend to yourself, right? If you're in the same cycles and if you're in the same relationships over and over and over again, you got to know, right, that it's not the guys. Yeah, they might be not the best, guys that you're with, right? But you got to take a look at yourself and figure out, why is it that I keep going into the same freaking pattern, right? Why is it that I keep ending up in the same situation over and over and over again, right? And you don't realize it until you actually start doing the work on yourself. You don't deserve to be treated like shit. You don't deserve to just put up with anything and just okay and put a smile on your face and keep going. You don't deserve that. You deserve to heal your inner child. You deserve to love, right? To be loved, right? And you deserve to be the queen, or in the reverse, the king that you're supposed to, right? Honor yourself, honor your truth, get down to the truth, and figure it out and evolve, or stay stuck repeating patterns. There's so many of you out there that refuse to do the work or start doing the work, and then you're like, oh, this is like way too much for me to deal with, and you stop, right? No, keep going. Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, there are times where, I'm in a corner crying, literally. And I'm like, oh my God, my whole entire body's shaking. But you know what? That's also clearing it out. And I have to say this eclipse season, right, was known to be in the beginning, a huge empath versus narcissist, right? And all of that coming into play, and all of that coming into head, and everything else, coming up to clear, right? Huge eclipse season this season. Has to be one of the biggest eclipse seasons we have ever experienced, on a human level, and an evolution, to your consciousness. Absolutely, hands down. There's so many things that happened, like you truly realize, like all of the masks. If you're with me, like all of the masks came off of everybody. And it was just a wow moment. Like, I know. Like obviously, right, you're doing all the healing, you're seeing, you know, everyone in your life for what their purpose is and who they are. And you could, if you're like me, you could read their purpose, too. Um, but when it really hits, like when the reality really hits of it all, and you realize, holy shit, like the illusion was that bad, right? You were living this illusion, right? And although you've been trying to break out of it like me for 4 years, when it all comes to head and it literally all comes to you like in your face, you really do realize, right? And it trickled, like I said, it has been trickling. I want to say the past 2 years have been the worst but the best at the same time of my life, right? The worst because man, landing on your ass rock bottom, right? Financially with three kids and being a single mom, it's rough, right? Having no one, right, in your family really support you. And I mean really support you, not on a financial level, right? Not on a just on a emotional, mental level, like, oh, you could do this, you could pull through this, you got this. When there's no one there in your family, you really realize what the fuck's going on, right? It took me how many years to fall at rock bottom? I was always in survival mode. I was in survival mode as a single mom. I made it happen. I kept houses. I freaking renovated houses and sold them, right? Like, I mean, I had this career in direct marketing. I had cash flow coming in so many directions. I started doing, spiritual stuff on the side, like helping people, evolve themselves. Even though I wasn't even fully evolved, but that was my calling, right? I had income streams coming in. I had everything. I literally hit rock bottom on a physical and conscious level where it was everything had to come up. Everything had to process out from childhood, from day one, all the way up until now, in order for me to have that quantum jump, to quantum leap and be able to be, the confident, self person that I am, right? And be able to share all this shit with you. But let me tell you, when you really see who's really there, it sucks, right? On a human perspective, on a human point of view, you're just like, wow. But you've seen it, right? You saw it coming all these years. You saw the seeds planted. You saw how everything was, like turning and accumulating. And when it comes to head, like I said, and it comes to reality, you're just like, holy shit, this is it. This is the moment where my body, for like, I want to say since August, since I came back from Europe, was shaking because I knew something was coming. And I was like, oh, my body knows. Like we're in for a major, major upgrade because like these 2 years weren't enough. This August was the month where I knew shit was going to go down. I was like, no matter what I did, shit was going down. I tried to eat correctly. I tried to ground myself. My nervous system was bouncing off the freaking charts because I was in a household living with my mother, right? And she was playing the same cycles out on my kids, or she was trying to anyway. And to having to always shut that down, that was enough to make your nervous system, like completely nuts. On top of being able to process it, not having it trigger you, and getting over that yourself. It's the real deal. And I know I'm not the only one who goes through this. It's the real deal. So, give yourself a high five for going through that and getting through that and processing that. But again, everybody's true colors come out. And it's all about you. It's all about you. It's all about your evolvement. It's all about, getting yourself up to play, up to speed, going on your soul purpose, your soul mission, right? Bringing the love out there, bringing the support out there, using your voice so other people will use theirs, right? That'll really realize and open their eyes and be like, holy shit, Um, never did I think I would end up in the position that I did ever, but I was in survival mode my entire life. My entire life. And once I hit like, 40s, and that was during COVID. COVID like revealed a lot. My dad also passed away during COVID, not related to COVID, but it happened during COVID. That also reveals a lot because there was no scapegoat anymore for my mom. Zero, zero scapegoat. That was a huge game changer, right? And my kids started to realize like a lot of shit, right? A lot of shit. My older two started to realize. Um, and then it escalated to, like what they were willing to tolerate and what they weren't too. And they were just like, holy shit, this is legit. Like this is for real. But again, survival mode. And like once I hit 40, right? In the 40s, so once COVID came, I started to get like very tired of being in survival mode, right? And that's when I started going, I was always into church, right? But that's when I started going to church. and praying and praying and releasing and really started digging really deep into my life. And I also, started getting a lot of past life, my ins and outs, right? And I know I said this on an episode. It was my first collab podcast that there were so many deaths. There were so many death scenes. We didn't get enough death scenes, right? Whenever I would do oh my gosh, whenever I would do hypnosis, right? Past life regression, interlife regression, it was the opposite. So I want to correct that too. It was I had a gazillion death scenes, none, the only birth scene ever coming in was this one. So that's how I also realized, oh, it makes sense, and I've spoken about, how you could tell, your walk in, walk out, person, soul, light being, because you realize that, there's across the board, you just see yourself the same age in like every single bracket of a decade, a year, like a hot minute, like just everything. And you're just like, okay, math's not mathing. And then, like you kind of you end up, with that anyway. But my whole thing is you have to have these tower moments, right? You have to be able to process everything. You have to love every single version of yourself, right? Every single version of yourself. You have to love. You have to accept. You have to forgive, right? And forgive, it means forgive for you, right? Like you're forgiving everybody for you to move on. Has nothing to do with them. You don't want to speak to anybody. And this comes from family, friends, coworkers, anything, associates. You don't have to forgive them to them, right? In their eyes, and have a relationship with them moving forward. No, you're forgiving them so you can move on, so you could heal, so you could be like, you know, so you could be free, so you could be free. So your nervous system could finally relax and you could be free. And that in itself is a glorifying moment. Although you're still going to have like, these little tiny evolution of frequency upgrades. We all do. It's forever. It's like ongoing. No human is ever perfect. Blah blah blah. I talk about this often. I also want to talk about the church thing because I have spoken about that on a podcast. Listen, religion, right? I was a diehard Catholic, and again, there's nothing worse than religion. Nothing. It's all full of shit. It's all propaganda. It's all there's nothing. Christ is inside of you, right? It's Christ consciousness, right? It's inside of you. There's no repenting. There's no like, begging for forgiveness for anything, asking like to come in and save me, like, Jesus, my savior, God, my savior. No, it's you. You are the savior, right? Not saying that Jesus doesn't exist because he most definitely does, right? Definitely does. And again, did he die on a cross? Didn't die on a cross. But he did have a huge ass spiritual awakening. And what he was getting upset at the fact that no one was evolving, that people were stuck, and he was trying to wake up society. So if you could relate to that, I know that's going to hit like really hard. And he couldn't bear really, which felt like carrying a cross on your back. He couldn't bear the weight of the fact that he was like coming into his whole full light being self, and and everybody was trying to shut him up. Also sounds like somebody else, right? That just happened 2 weeks ago. It's true. No one wants to hear the truth. No one. Sometimes not even your human self wants to hear the truth. It spirals out of control. It doesn't want to hear it. It doesn't want to deal with it. Pushes the awakening aside, pushes the evolvement, to the side. No one wants to hear the truth. But sometimes it's got to come out. I'm going to leave you at that. So, peace out, guys. So, total much love, light, fire energy, and keep growing. Keep working on yourself. It's the best thing that you could possibly do. Let all the cycles break. Let all the timelines collapse. and step into the highest, most best version, of yourself and do it for you, not anyone else but you. Peace out, guys.